call the April meeting to order and welcome all of you. Once, I just want to give a word of gratitude to SMAC members for your trust in electing me as chair. And I look forward to serving as I've served on this committee for going into my 4th year. Also want to welcome Barrett and Luann, who are new to SMAC, and later in the agenda we'll recognize them. So we have one excused absence, which is Katie. And so may I have a motion to accept that excused absence? So second. Second. All those in favor? Any opposition? Very good. Approval of the minutes, minutes from the March 3rd meeting. Anything that needs to be updated or corrected in those minutes? May I have a motion that we accept the March minutes? So second. Okay. All in favor? Any opposition? Very good. Now on to the public comment period. I know we have Mr. Tim Martin, who signed up to speak about, I think, tree preservation. Yes, so, and I know he has some slides that he will present. So we have 3 minutes for that. And I have a singing bowl, so when you hear the singing bowl chime, that's the end of your 3 minutes. So feel free to start.
Thank you, Reverend Taylor, for having me. Thank you, committee. It's a real honor to be here. Thank you for your service on something that is near and dear to my heart, and that is called the life that we enjoy in Raleigh, North Carolina, that is so popular that everybody's moving here. And we're seeing rapid development, and associated with this growth is rapid loss of our tree canopy. And when I talk about this, I usually try to start with something simple, like how many here like to, let's do a show of hands, how do you like to breathe? Right? I mean, it's almost like a double hand, right? The thing about breathing that all life does is takes in oxygen, that's the yellow color, and exhales carbon dioxide. And it happens at a really interesting place at the tips of our lungs, almost like our fingertips. It's called an alveoli. It's a little air sac that most people don't know about. But if you go to the next slide, please. I'm coming from an artist perspective, and I'm not very familiar with city government or UDO ordinances, but Article 9.1, tree conservation, has no mention whatsoever to the facts of life, like, I don't know, air, and how invaluable trees are for our lives. There's no mention of air. But the good news is, pending text changes to that ordinance is coming your way for review. Planning staff has written a updated version of the ordinance, and I'm sorry to say it still is inadequate to protect something as simple as the air we breathe. And what I did with that last drawing is I took the alveoli and I paired it with a white oak tree. And as you know, in the city of Oak resident, we get our oxygen from trees. So, next slide. But something maybe more relevant to this committee would be the inescapable fact that mature native trees store so much water. If that tree goes, then all the rain falling down on our sites that are being developed at the less than 1 acre, the less than 2 acres, all the way up to 26 is the one I'm thinking of. Are y'all familiar with Budley East at the corner of, it's a development that was just clear cut, 26 acres at the corner of Oberlin and Fairview, right next to where my boys and I like to watch chimney swifts come in September, and they do their murmuration thing in September. There are about 2,000 birds, and they land in the old middle school chimney. Next slide, and I'll just wrap this up. Another thing that trees provide are basically the keystone of biodiversity. And this is our food webs, and it leads all the way up to the food we eat. So there's just three basics, tip of the iceberg. I'll stop here. Are there any questions? The good news is we have a chance to write all this life into our code. So it's, our life is protected. Does that sound good?
And I'm thinking, I mean, when the city writes the codes, typically it's a kind of a combination of our purpose that the code starts with is, okay, why are we doing what we're doing, why are we writing what we're doing? And I guess that's where that information needs to go. And one of the things is for all those benefits.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I forgot to pass this out. On the back side of all these drawings is a list of my tree friends and I came up with a recommendation. Here's our top 5 things that can be done. It's the same list on all the cards. Each card is one of those issues that I just shared. And what else? The last thing I'll end with is, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we have entered into an age of, what do we call it? And the Anthropocene, right? Have y'all heard about that term? And that's when there's so many people on the planet that we are affecting all this change. And so what that means is that business as usual is over. We have to do better. We're running out of time. And I have a film series that I put together to explain just that. And I can have Wayne forward to y'all. I think it's something that we all should be talking about. It's all explained in the second film. It is by sort of international consortium of scientists called the Stockholm Resilience Center. It has all your favorite actors in some of those films. They're mostly are available on Netflix. This is common knowledge. And if we as government leaders don't do something soon, I think the scientific community has given us 8 years to do something, and others argue that we have less time. But I think it really is up to us. And all the data is here. I'll pass this around, but oak trees are so important that somebody just wrote a book about them. And we're the city of oak trees, not the city of crepe myrtles.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Mr. Martin, for your obvious passion and commitment. As I understand it, SMAC does not have an official capacity as it relates to this UDO. So you're presenting us for information. I appreciate that, and I'm grateful for your engagement in the public process.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. So we'll move on to commissioner comments. We started about a year ago inviting different commissioners to spend 2 minutes just to tell us about yourself. And so the person today is your vice chair, Graham Smith.
All right, okay. A little bit about myself. I'm a landscape architect. I've been in Raleigh for about 16 years. And so work in private practice, run a small company called Site Collaborative here in Raleigh. We've been fortunate enough to work on many projects with private clients, but also with the city as a client. One of our recent projects that's going to open in May, which is very exciting, is Wooten Meadow Park, which has been a collaboration between City Park, the Parks and Recreation, Cultural Resources, and Stormwater Division. So that's where we worked with the team of engineers. We were the lead consultant when we daylit the stream, and then created 3 wetlands in the Harrison Creek watershed. So that's pretty exciting. And thanks to Kevin Boyer, Amy Ferdinelli, and Heather Dutra, significant efforts, stormwater on that. Myself, I have 2 daughters, 8th grade and 12th grade, so I'm about ready to pay for some college tuition next year. Been working through all of that process, and been married for 18 years, and originally from Virginia Beach area, Chesapeake. So Dismal Swamp, let's say. So,
Thank you. Thanks so much, Grant. Nicola is our planning commission liaison, newly appointed. I don't know if you have any information about the PC or that engagement.
Yeah, I think just after kind of initial conversation, I think I have the role and what I hope to get out of it and provide this group is really just kind of a coordination and touch point. So kind of carrying on going forward, hoping to coordinate with the planning commission is kind of start that relationship. I hope it can be a two-way relationship where we can kind of share that knowledge, make sure we're keeping each other informed, and we can, yeah, continue on that relationship and make sure that we're aware of how we can kind of collaborate and help each other's team.
Okay. Thanks, Nicola.
If I could make one follow-up comment from a case that I had mentioned previous to Phil becoming the liaison. I had mentioned at a couple of meetings, it was a case in the Falls Lake watershed. It was for proposed rezoning at the corner of Six Forks Road and Strickland Road. I wanted to follow up and report that that case, when it came to council, was that rezoning was denied. Okay, so that closes that case for this point in time.
Okay. And you have the floor, so.
Okay. Excellent.
Smack updates and staff updates.
Okay, we do have two commission members joining us today. Ms. Luann Phillips and Mr. Barrett Jenkins. And if appropriate, if you all would like to take a moment just to introduce yourselves very, very briefly, I think that might be helpful to the commission.
Okay, I'll go first. I've lived in Raleigh for almost 35 years now. My husband and I live in North Raleigh. We have two grown children in their early 30s, and I have a granddaughter in first grade at Lynn Road Elementary. Love school. Recently, I retired from the state doing human resources, but my background is in city planning. So I just quickly tell you, I have a master's degree in city and regional planning from Ohio State. I worked for the city of Columbus while I was going to school there, did neighborhood planning. I then worked in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., Prince William County, Virginia, and Prince George's County, Maryland, doing zoning request reviews and also planning, long-range planning for public facilities, like schools and fire stations, police stations, things like that. And I did serve on Planning and Zoning Commission in Texas. My husband's career took us to Texas, so I was on Planning and Zoning Commission in Wichita Falls, Texas.
I'm Barrett, and I work with Restoration Systems, a mitigation company. We do stream, wetland, nutrient offset credit, and buffer mitigation. That sort of deals and overlaps a little bit with some stormwater things. I have two daughters. They go to Root Elementary School right now. Well, one of them's actually in daycare, so they're a little bit younger than yours. So I have a little bit of time for the college thing. Been in Raleigh 15 years, minus the stint in Austin, Texas. And I'm glad to be here.
Welcome. Thank you very much for the introductions. I have a few stormwater staff updates as well. First of all, we have two new stormwater plan review engineers. Lauren Pools is a promotion from within stormwater. She has 8 years of experience as an inspector and additional experience in the plan review group previously. Bachelor's degree in meteorology from NC State and has completed graduate coursework in environmental assessment and analysis. And then Molly Zahorian is moving to this position into the stormwater division. She has been with the city in the roadway design and construction group for the past year. She has a bachelor's degree in biosystems engineering from Auburn and has water resources engineering experience in co-op and internship roles with the city of Atlanta and Montgomery Water Works. Renee Wilson, who has been in the stormwater group, is being promoted to a senior fiscal specialist. So this is a newly created role as part of this year's budget. And Renee is currently part of the business services team where she served the past 3 years as an administrative specialist. And she's been with the city of Raleigh since 2015. She brings extensive administrative and financial knowledge along with a great understanding of the PeopleSoft financial software package. So she'll be working with our financial analyst, Javier Hutchins, on everything fiscal and financial. Two more. Allison Garrity has been promoted to a senior engineering specialist in the stormwater fee replacement accounts group. Allison's primary role is providing quality control of our stormwater billing accounts, as well as addressing citizen questions about their billing. In her new role, in addition to continuing her current duties, she will also be expanding the quality control to help identify incorrect billing. In fact, she's already started doing this and has recently identified previously unbilled accounts that will increase stormwater revenues by several $100,000 per year. And then lastly, we have a new project manager in our infrastructure CIP group, and Emily Small will be joining that group to manage future CIP and drainage assistance projects. She has over 10 years of experience in the consulting business. It comes to us from a private consulting firm in Raleigh. She has a bachelor's degree in civil environmental engineering from Worcester Polytechnic Institute and a master's in civil environmental engineering from Northeastern University in Boston. And she has recently also passed the professional management project management exam. So we're very excited to have folks filling these new roles and joining our program. Good. Okay, a few quick updates. Many of you all will remember the presentation that Scott Payne gave, I believe it was last fall. Scott is the Assistant Director in the Parks, Recreation and Cultural Resources Department, and his presentation was on the Biophilic Cities program, which is certification. It's an international program, certification related to protection of trees, green space, as well as the environmental and social benefits that come with that. I'm pleased to report that SMEC did support that application, and we've recently found out that application was accepted. So the city is joining that program, and we'll give you an update as that moves forward. Those of you who were here at the March meeting, I gave a preview of the budget presentation for fiscal year 23 that I would be giving to City Council on March 14th, which I did. I'm pleased to report that the feedback from council was very positive on that. They have yet to make a final decision. That will come likely in June. But the feedback for the proposed 2.5% rate increase to our stormwater fee was received well. And so lots of good feedback. The only question that we received, as we discussed, we're planning for our first revenue bond to be issued in fiscal year 25. And Councilmember Knight asked, can we do it sooner? We want stormwater moving forward. So we see that as a positive type of supportive question. But overall, very, very, very good feedback. So thank you all for your input and comments that you provided during the budgeting process and in that presentation. One other item I want to report, the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, who is the issuer of our NPDES municipal stormwater permit. This is a clean water, federally mandated Clean Water Act permit that's administered by the state. They are auditing us, and we knew this was coming. And we got the official notice that the way the audit will be performed is it will be a two-step process. The first step will be a self-audit that we will complete, and that is well underway. It's due on April 27th, and we've been having lots of meetings. Justin Harko, who's going to talk to you about part 3 today, has also been leading that effort. And we feel very good about where we sit as a program relative to that audit, but we will keep you apprised of the results of that. And we'll be moving forward with that self-audit. Then once we submit the self-audit, the state will review that, pick one program that they will then do an in-person audit to come and ask for the documentation and make site visits to follow up. So we'll also be preparing for that and keep you all apprised. And then the rainwater rewards quarterly update. There's a memorandum in your package that has updates on some of the staff approved projects, the smaller projects that have been approved. But Justin Markham will be presenting here in just a moment. So if you do have any other questions about the quarterly update, you're welcome to ask Justin when he's up making the presentation for the projects that are up for approval this month. And then I have no notices prior to construction reports. That's my report.
Thank you. Any questions?
So a quick question on the Fps audit, for the kind of permanent audit. Do you mind walking through just very briefly, like I know you mentioned the soft audit, was done late April, and then a follow-up one. How often has this happened before in the past, or is it just kind of a random selection? How do they select who gets audited and how quickly it's resolved? We're not resolved.
Yeah. So I'll answer. I may ask this gentleman, Mark Senior, who was in my role previously, will talk about the disagree. But we knew this was coming. The goal is for the state to audit everyone who holds one of those permits every permit cycle, which is 5 years.
Right, okay.
And typically, the plan is to do those audits in the 5th year of the permit, which the permit will be renewed in 2023. So this is really the fifth year
Yeah.
of that permit. So that's the cycle and the expectation of permits. I'm not sure if it was how consistently it's been done in the past, Mark. You recall?
The audits that they performed, phase ones were not all in permit cycle. Initially, they renewed Greensboro and then renewed Durham or whatever. I think Raleigh was last done, I want to say 2012 or 14, but it's been quite a while. Since they looked at the phase ones, they've been focusing on the phase two smaller communities that are much, not nearly as in compliance as the phase one, the big cities. And so they kind of got those done now. Now they're stepping up to look at the phase one, the larger communities. And it's an audit, but it's really a program assistant, which is they come in and they want to try to help you improve your program, make sure you do what you're doing. Not really challenge anybody with that stuff. And they found a lot of problems with smaller communities, so it's a very well played.
Yeah, thanks both for the additional context. I wasn't sure if it was a shot in the dark or kind of a cyclical thing, so appreciate that.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of work for staff, so
Yeah.
be nice to them.
No action needed, just received that information and move right on to Justin, you're up.
I appreciate the intro there. I mean, work for staff and the guys. Appreciate it.
We had a notebook about this thick when we first started.
Now we have digital files welcome everyone. Good to see returning members. Welcome new members. Here to talk about rainwater awards for the next half an hour or so. As Wayne mentioned, you'll see in your backup documents a quarterly report. And before we get into that, I just want to do a quick overview of what Raleigh Rainwater Awards is for new members. We're a water quality reimbursement program. And so we aim to support stormwater management and water quality projects on properties that are otherwise not required to do so. So it's an incentive for property owners. Projects are supported on private, public, institutional properties. We've supported about 160, 170 citywide over the last 12 years. The policy requires that we report quarterly to folks, to the commission, number of projects approved each quarter and the amount of funds expended through this program. And that's what you'll find for you in the memo. And then you also have a table showing the history of every project that has been approved, sorted by project type, and then further sorted by our nitrogen cost metric, which you will see throughout all the documents. It's a function of total cost and pollutant removed by that project. So it's how we rank a permeable paver project to a rain garden, to a cistern. It's so you just know they're all ranked by that, and that the commission in February of 2021 recommended the staff to cap that metric. So you'll see a common a frequent reference to that metric showing that the application is below that cap. So are there any questions on the quarterly report or the program as a whole? All right, Matt, would you mind starting that slide, and I'll have to remember how to use a remote. So just to start out, I have 5 projects to present today. That's a lot of ground to cover. And I just wanted to go over real quick the format of the applications, how we do the slides. Typically there's 5 to 6 slides per project. We lead with a project summary. We have an estimate of cost. You got to remember these projects haven't been built yet, so these are estimates, they're bids. The policy requires projects that request more than $5,000 in reimbursement to get 3 estimates prior to reimbursement. So how most folks do that is at time of application, they'll submit 3 estimates with the lowest being the basis for reimbursement. So most cases you'll see that's the price, the estimate shown for the project. In some instances where estimates are pending, just know that staff is required to look at all the estimates prior to reimbursement, and that would be the basis for reimbursement at the end of the project. So just wanted to touch on that. So we'll have the estimate of cost. We'll have the water quality metrics, which I just touched on. There'll be a slide for that. You'll be tired of seeing these by the end of the presentation, but there'll be a project comparison chart, which will have the table showing how this rain garden compares to every other rain garden we've ever supported. Then you'll have a maintenance slide. All projects that go before the commission that request over $5,000 will require a 10-year maintenance period. So that it's a standard. So we do include a slide showing the maintenance. All the maintenance requirements are unique to each project type. So I won't spend a lot of time on the maintenance for each project type, but I want you to know the slides here is taken into consideration, is presented to you, and I'll entertain questions on that. But not think I'm rushing through slides. I just wanted to lay it out. That's what each presentation will look like. And it'll look like that for one project in some quarters and 5 in others like this. So we will go ahead and move into our first project today, which I'm leading I'm leading with this project not only because this came in December, so several months ago, but it's also the most complex project type that the program supports. Permanent pavers, all other projects that the program supports is a direct 75 or 90% reimbursement for costs. In 2015, City Council amended the policy so that the program supported these projects differently. It's typically said that the program now supports what makes a driveway permeable as opposed to the driveway. So how we get to that is we develop an acceptable cost for a permanent paver project. So we take the cost of a permanent paver driveway, for instance, $15 per square foot. We take a cost of what a traditional driveway in that same footprint would be, say $10 a square foot, and we subtract those numbers. That difference, that $5 difference in this example, is what is then eligible for either 75 or 90% reimbursement. So that's how the city will support what makes that driveway permeable. There's no easy way to explain that to someone standing in their driveway or to a commission or in front of, but if there's any questions, I'll let me know. The reason I'm getting in the weeds on this is because in October, the commission did question, what was the cost basis for a traditional driveway. Since Mark Sr. might recall, it was $5 per square foot. Someone said, is that still accurate? Well, staff reached out to several contractors, and overwhelmingly, that's not accurate anymore. So we staff settled on a $10 per square foot cost basis for the cost of a traditional driveway. This is the first project where it has been implemented or applied, I guess would be the way to put it. And I wanted to just lay that out. So 1, to respond to the commission, and 2, so we can roll through it once we get to the application. So I've laid a huge amount of groundwork here, but I think we're good to move into the individual applications. Any questions so far? If not, 115 Hudson Street, we do have the applicants here in attendance today in support of the project. It's a rather large permanent paver project, captures almost 4,000 square feet of runoff, as they're capturing a lot of runoff from their house, and I believe even from their detached shed in the back. This property went through permitting, had the entire driveway and part of that storage unit in the back permitted as impervious surface. They then came to the program and said, we want to go above and beyond. That is where we're able to support permanent paver footprint on where they've been permitted to have impervious footprint. So that's how we're able to be involved in this project. You can see the cost breakdown, and you'll notice here how we get to, I guess I have a laser, but you'll notice how we get to the acceptable cost. Permanent pavers are expensive projects, hence the change from back in 2015.
we take out our cost of traditional, we get to an acceptable cost, and then 75% of that is what the applicant is on. Just another cost breakdown, a little cleaner without the itemized cost. Total cost, acceptable cost is the 27,625 with 75% of that. Let me back up here. Here is the cost metric slide that I had mentioned. You can see this number right here. Total ice removed over the life of the project. The cap that the commission recommended staff utilize was $7,000 per pound of total ice removed over the life of the project. So this is well under. Main reason, or the main driver why this is such a cost-effective project is because they have great infiltration on their property. They're able to capture 4,000 square foot of runoff, a 1-inch rain event on that amount of from that amount of impervious surface, and all of it infiltrates in the ground on site. So maximizing that and also maximizing the amount of additional runoff they're directing to it. You have a footprint, you're almost doubling what drains to it. So hence the low metric there, the attractive metric when compared. Here's your comparison against previously approved permanent paver projects. We haven't supported any in the past. Out of 107 projects, this is what we've supported. And this one compares very well to previously approved. And this is also in your backup document as part of the bigger table. This is just pulled out. Here is the maintenance slide that I referenced that every project will have with maintenance requirements tailored to the project being presented on. Once again, they all carry 10-year maintenance periods. And I guess I'll ask the chair, do you prefer me to go through the 5 or do you? All right. So I will take questions at this point then for 115 Hudson Street, if there are any. If not, we will roll into our next project, which we also have the site representative here for that project, and that is 301 Woodcliff Road. This is a 2 rain garden project. Not nearly as complex, no groundwork to lay down. This is a 75% reimbursement project. It's in the Crabtree Creek watershed. Big footprints of rain gardens. It's for someone's backyard. 2 big rain gardens. That means they're capturing a lot of runoff. So you see, big roof. There's a big driveway next to it. There's a basketball court next to it. All this runoff is going to 2 features that you'll see located, drawn, depicted in this rendering in the back quarters of the lot. The topography allows it to easily be directed to the surface of these features. The other thing I was going to mention. The topography allows for easy drainage to the features and great infiltration rate. No under drains are needed in these. These are all able to completely infiltrate. You always concerned about a feature like this. If you have to have an under drain and you're capturing so much runoff, because then you have the potential to have a nuisance downstream of it. So all of these, fully infiltrate within a 72-hour period. Moving on, cost breakdown. Looking at bigger rain gardens that we would see at the staff level, and we're looking at 2 of them. So you're looking at total cost of $27,427 with eligibility of 75% of that because of location in Crabtree Creek. Once again, the breakdown. Water quality metrics. Once again, it's under the $7,000 cap. And this is a truncated table for our rain gardens. We have this table will span past the floor. It's 85 of these. So I chopped out certain parts. I took liberty in choosing where those cuts took place. But I think that's a fair representation of, while it's not the cheapest, it's definitely not the most expensive from a cost-effective standpoint. Rain garden maintenance requirements, which you will see again on some future projects today. And I'll take any questions on 301 Woodcliff.
Jump back to the breakdown of the costs. Different components.
Okay, this project believe, received 3 bids already in advance. Yes, this project received 3 bids in advance. They all were within $2,000 of that estimate, but the other 2 are higher.
Okay, the backward water is to the plan view.
That needs it back.
Now, is the plan thing's just gonna be the stuff that's shaded in there, I assume that we're paying for it?
And we really emphasize that
Okay,
because folks,
because there's a lot of plant going on.
there is, and they do have some plantings, but granted, they will be doing some more. What we do require at time of reimbursement is an itemized invoice. So they won't just be able to say, hey, here's the amount. They have to be able to show, hey, these are plantings for the rain garden.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that, I guess that's coming. All right. Any other questions with Woodcliff? All right, we'll jump into 1205 Crosslink Road. This is a cistern project for a community garden. The owner of so it's 2 properties. The project is going to be located on one property, and all the impervious surface runoff from that property is going to be captured by the cistern. It's going to be used on the next door property, which is owned by a Cooper Horton Center for Achievement, Education, and Empowerment. And you can see I have a picture of the community garden, and the location of the cistern will be right there at the property line. That roof will be captured and it'll be used next door. All of our cisterns require passive drawdowns to make sure they recharge between rain events, making them in essence water quality feature. Here's a good schematic to show how where they're gonna position their 2 units with the equalizer pipe, and then the amount of roof being captured. And then the property line is right next to it. Here's the breakdown in cost. Everything on this table here has been historically been deemed eligible for reimbursement. The reason I point that out, like the GFCI electrical circuit outside to be able to plug their pump in, all of those things are needed for the cistern to function. So we do have examples of where these costs have been supported in the past. The breakdown in cost, very similar to the last couple we've looked at. Once again, it's a little bit higher than the previous projects for cost metric. And I think the limiting factor there is the amount of impervious surface to be captured on the property. It's just that house. There isn't a paved driveway or outhouse to pull off of. So this couple things with it, y'all are gonna see these tables in your sleep tonight. One comment about these are all above ground cisterns only. When you factor in underground cisterns, or let's say all cistern types, this would be a little bit more in the center, in the middle of the pack. Other than that, it is a little bit higher on when compared to other project types. And they also have received 3 estimates prior to submittal, with one being very close to the amount that they submitted with, and one being considerably higher. Cistern maintenance. And any questions with the 1205 Crosslink Road cistern project?
Nicola has a
That's a
question.
quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you mind explaining, excuse my ignorance on this, is the main driver of that cost just the distance it's going between 2 land? I mean, just trying to seem accurate, apples to apples, if all the other ones were on the same property side, is that contributing to it?
I don't think it's because it's on a separate property. We won't support any cost associated with getting it or anything downstream of the spigot. So we'll include the pump, but we will no piping to the farm or the community garden. So that's where we draw the line. Anyone who wants to put sprinkler systems in. I think a big driver here, it just might be the general cost of construction going up. We're seeing that with rain gardens. You'll notice the next project is a single family home, small rain garden that is above the staff review threshold. And it's somewhat unusual that, I'd say unusual. We're starting to see it more common now with the rising cost. So that might be the situation here. There usually is not a lot of cost with piping those downspouts to the cistern. So,
Is that smaller drainage area?
it is the smallest drainage area on this cistern. It is just that house. And I was saying that's one of the limiting factors that I would say is driving that number. They would like to have a bigger cistern out here. And if they had a twice as large house or another building, like I said, an out parcel building that they could also direct, the cost would not increase much, but the metric would go down. So I think the limiting factor in this situation is the amount of impervious surface that they're able to catch. And I know y'all probably don't see residential projects as much. The limiting factor for most residential properties is the impervious surface on that property to treat. So and that's showing itself here. I think the rising cost is showing itself here a little bit. But hopefully that.
Just last question there. So the other costs, the layer on the right, it's the project data approval there, but the previous costs are not escalated.
Correct. That's stuck in time.
Yeah.
I guess
Thank
that's
you.
future endeavor, a multiplier time.
Yeah, give me that extra work on that. I just wanted to understand.
Post audit, post MS4 on. All right, any other questions on 1205 Crosslink?
Let's go back to the plan real quick. It just seemed disconnected from that house, so I'm just curious how they're.
So cistern is going to be over here. Downspouts coming. The grade allows easy flow to these yellow pipes, which are the pipe downspouts. You got I think they have a submersible pump that goes in over there.
What's not above grade?
It is above ground system, yes, sir.
There's a pipe from the house to the cistern.
Now, what they typically will do is downspouts will into the ground, use solid pipe, solid pipe, PVC pipe, taking it to the cistern, up it into the system. Yeah. Well, it doesn't, a lot of times gravity, you'll have enough head pressure to get up into the system. Topography will dictate that. All right, good to move on to Gardner Road. All right. 1409 Gardner Road. This is that small rain garden on a residential property. Like I said, it's in the Walnut Creek watershed, eligible for 75% reimbursement. You see, they're going to be capturing the runoff from their house and taking it to the front yard, where the topography allows it to be directed to the surface of the rain garden. They have good infiltration right here, so they're able to allow that water to infiltrate. The finished rain garden will be visible from the sidewalk, so it'll be a landscape community along with the actual functional device. Project cost, pretty standard for a single rain garden. You can compare it back to the one that had two rain gardens, a little bit larger size from Wood Cliff, I believe it was. So you're able to kind of compare apples to apples. When you look at the metric here on the next slide, you'll see that it's very comparable to the previous rain garden metric under the cap and comparable. And just in case you were trying to block these out, one more, same one as before, but just highlighting where this one is. It's right there with Wood Cliff for function of cost and impervious surface being treated. And you're about to see it another time next slide, Blue Ridge Road. There's your maintenance requirements. And any questions on this? They're pretty straightforward. 75% reimbursement request for the rain garden, Gardner Road. Is there a plan? There is not a plan. So how we set up these, most of your smaller rain gardens don't necessarily have a landscape architect or design professional development. So what we have is our application is more of prompts. And it requires you to design your rain garden as you're going through it. What is your profile? Do you have an overflow? Well, there's only one answer. You have to have an overflow. So as you're building this out, it will dictate what that rain garden will look like. And we have kind of a minimum guidance. We need to have an 18-inch profile. We need to have that overflow structure. We need to have some sort of inlet dissipation or that kind of thing. Triple shredded hardwood mulch for mulch plantings. All the things that are the defining components of a rain garden, we have prompts in that application, so they make sure they answer correctly. And so that's how we build it's applicable, or it's easy for a homeowner that may not be well versed in stormwater to work through that and design their own, but still meet our goals. Whereas then you have some, which we support the cost, and if somebody wants to go with the professional designer and get really detailed and not only meet our requirements, but sometimes exceed, and then add the whole aesthetic on top of it as mutually beneficial for us as showcase, and to the applicant as a aesthetic feature on their part. All right, and I'll move, any questions on Gardner Road? Anything else? I'll move into the fifth project here. And this is Blue Ridge Road, where there is a lot of stormwater activity going on out here. We have a big project out there, city project, road widening project of Blue Ridge. And there's a lot of stormwater conversations around that project, which is good. This is at the St. Paul's Christian Church. There's a very motivated group of folks at that church that they are proposing multiple projects across their church campus, 2 rain gardens and a large cistern. Those rain gardens will capture roof runoff from 2 separate buildings and a parking lot. And the cistern will also capture some roof runoff to use in their church community garden. So we're showing you this. This is a good overall schematic. They did use a design professional to draw these rain gardens, to lay these out. This is a good overall view of where everything's at. You have a big rain garden here coming off this parking lot. Excuse me if I'm blocking your way, but you have, this, a lot of this runoff will go right into that rain garden. You would have pipe runoff coming off this building. So half of that building will go to that second rain garden. And then they have the front side of that roof that will go to a cistern. And then you have the garden, the north part of that photo, where you can see where that water will be utilized. They actually wanted to go bigger here. They wanted to go bigger rain garden. They didn't have enough footprint. You run into wood line in the back corner. There's a sanitary sewer easement they have to stay out of. And so you had some other site limitations, but they are really excited about this project, and we're looking forward to receiving y'all's feedback. So they are capturing about 7,500 square feet of runoff on this property. That's a picture of their garden. You can see how the runoff is probably right now running off that parking lot down that hill. That's the main building that they're capturing some of their brother cistern. And then it's that sewer easement that they're staying out of. So to break down what I did here, they have received 1 estimate today. We're still working on their 2 estimates. This is the estimate that for everything, design work, the cistern, and both rain gardens. And I combined all the costs to make it a little more digestible here today. And I'll show you how that compares from a cost metric standpoint here. Pretty good metric when compared to other project types. And so, well under the cap. And what I've done here is broken up. If you just take the rain garden project out, this is where that would compare against other rain gardens. And if you just took the cistern part of the project out with cost, this is where it would be for above ground cisterns. Whereas this number is a whole site combination there. So you got the 2 slides showing the maintenance requirements you all have memorized by now, and I'll take questions on this integrated project off Blue Ridge Road.
So I have a question about this project. You said they received 1 estimate, so they have 2 more to come in.
Yes, sir.
So how will that impact our work here today? Is it customary to vote, let's say the two estimates, come in lower than we approved, then more money has been approved than is needed. So I guess, what's the time period they expect to get the two other estimates? And would there be any delay in, pausing and waiting to May, to look at this?
As for delay, I don't think there's anyone here from the church today. They might be tuning in remotely. I can't speak to that on their schedule. As for how we would handle it, the next thing that happens after approval is we enter into a legal agreement with the city. Or they enter into a legal agreement with the city, which will spell out maintenance terms, maximum reimbursement. And so ideally, prior to moving forward to that next step, to make it official legal document between both parties, we would have those additional estimates and be able to move forward with those numbers. If not that, then we'll approve, or if this project is approved, it'll be approved up to this amount. And then at time of reimbursement, we would look at those bids and say, your cost was this, but your lowest bid was this. The reimbursement will be based on this amount. And it'll be based off that estimate. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I just want to point out that on a per pound of nitrogen, this is much cheaper than all the other ones presented today, right?
That's probably a function of the amount of impervious surface, right? It's
Yeah.
0.17 acres, I think.
So even if it is a little higher per pound of nitrogen, it is the cheapest thing we've seen today in terms of approving.
Right.
But we're essentially, we're approving the high side. You've got one of the estimates, and if this is the low number, then it's the low number. And if the other two come in higher, we're not approving the higher, we're approving the low.
Right.
This is the mark that we're approving.
Right, at this point in time, this is the estimate. Once again, all this is based on estimates.
Yeah.
Correct, if I'm tracking what you're saying, Graham, that is correct. This is the estimate at this point. So this would be your mark. That is what we would either be up to this, if this is the lowest, or at time of reimbursement, or if we get them prior to the legal agreement, we can adjust that to accordingly. And that's per the policy. And I think that 3 bid requirement extends beyond rainwater boards. I think that's a citywide on anything over 5,000.
Did you explain what you just articulated to Graham, to the congregation, or to whoever the liaison is?
Absolutely. I'll be
Okay.
sure. I'll
No,
be
so did you, or
Oh,
have you
yeah.
done that?
They're well aware.
Okay.
They were trying to get their 3 estimates. They've already tried to get 3 estimates. They were
Okay.
trying to have them here for this meeting. And they were not able to get all 3. They just had this one. So I said, well, I'm more than happy to take it forward with your estimate as you do your due diligence to get your other. I can't speak to this group necessarily, but I know that one of the owners reached out to 14 contractors before they got their 3 estimates. And like I said, I can't say that that's the case here, but it is a unique market right now for this. They're aware they need 2 more prior to being completed and ever getting reimbursement. The reimbursement does involve site visits, reviewed by multiple staff. It's not just reviewed by me. And those estimates are considered. I really advocate for getting them on the front end because it makes it easy for everyone to see on the front end. But in cases like this where they're highly motivated and want to move it, I'm more than happy to take it forward. And if that cost was, as you had brought up, maybe was higher, say, hey, this is most likely not going to be the price that we move forward with. I would definitely highly recommend for them to get additional prior to moving forward. But that's what they requested. So here we are today.
Just make sure I understand. The congregation understands that this is the line, and there could be some financial hit, and they chose to present anyway. That's what you were saying.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, all right,
Yes.
just make sure I'm clear. Wayne?
Yeah, just one point of clarification, and at the request of the commission in the past, which certainly can be changed, we've been bringing the rainwater rewards and the DA project approvals every 3rd meeting, just quarterly, so that we have room for other activities and other agendas. certainly if there was some, specific thing like related to month, we could add that to the agenda, but just for folks to know, the typical is we'll bring these every 3 meetings.
Okay. Any more questions on this project? I know that the property owners for Hudson Street and Woodcliff were here. I don't know if they had comments you wanted to make at this time.
So, Hudson Street is in the back. Cameron,
Briefly, thank you all for being here and thank you for considering our project. It was really exciting to be here in person and see how efficient our project is, and especially looking at all the other projects. So I'm really happy that this could be a good investment for the city. And Justin, it's been a long road. We've been working on this for probably years together, so we appreciate your diligence.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. And Laura, would you like to say anything about Woodcliff?
No, actually, I'm the landscape designer that couldn't make it today, but I just wanted to be here if there were any questions. Thank you.
Just want to make sure my math is correct. With all these projects, we're a little bit north of 192,000 in this arena. This is around 90, which would leave us at about 100K. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, very good. Any questions on these projects? So we have a motion that we accept all projects as presented. Is there a second? All in favor, say yes. Any opposition? Very good, unanimous. Thank you so much, Justin.
Thank you all.
All right, Chaz, you're up. Yeah, and so Jeff, we have one question from, right?
So just curious, having gone through the process, but what is yours? And I don't know, what's your staffing to, there are 170 projects on the ground. There's more coming, apparently doing some audit work. So, I mean, how is the R3 projects, how do they fit into the system of stormwater?
Yeah, we are gainfully employed. Let's say that. Yeah, so I think everyone would probably say the same thing. So yes, the MS4 audit does add another thing to the table, but we are trying to build capacity and try to bring other folks into the program. So you'll notice for folks who are already a participant, a different individual will be reaching out to y'all for annual maintenance. We're trying to build capacity for site visits, but those folks would answer the same way I'd answer if asked. So, yeah, so that's.
But you're not dedicated to the R3 program. I mean, it is your responsibility, but you have other responsibilities. I'm just trying to, because I have gotten from Zach or somebody else. I'm just trying to figure out how it fits. There's doing a lot of work.
So appreciate it. I would, so it's not my sole position at all.
Okay.
There's a lot, I oversee some staff who oversee some MS4 programs. We have MS4 compliance stuff we work on in my group. There's 3 of us. And then R3 is in there as well. And we sprinkled in as your occasional CIP water quality project. So it's a mixed bag, which is great. But yeah, that's kind of how, me and you can see before here, my previous manager would always joke that R3 was supposed to be that 10% of my job. That ends up being 110% of the stuff. But no, it's a good program. And we're still open for business for rock and roll. Record year, 37 projects this year. So this fiscal year, thanks to these approvals. So.
Thank you. Yeah, very much. We did add one new position to that group. Was it 2 years ago now, Justin? A year and a half ago? We're definitely keeping an eye on that capacity and adding as needed. It's a popular program, and we think it's very beneficial. Thank you. All right.
Welcome, everybody. Nice to see y'all in person. I'm Chaz Webb. I am the Drainage Systems Supervisor and manage the Drainage Systems Program, as well as the upcoming Stream Stabilization Program. So what I'm going to do is just an overview of the drainage program. We'll look at the pending projects, then the project requests, then the funding overview, and then recommendations and questions. So it's been a while since before the commission, we talked about what the drainage systems program is, some of the things that we do. So for our new members and members who have been here in the past, in order to qualify, you must own property within the city limits of Raleigh. You have to have stormwater from a public street. You have to be willing to donate a drainage easement. We have what we call as an intent form that we go out and we look at these projects, we get the complaints. We explain to them, hey, you have to donate an easement. And they say, okay. Sometimes people, when they see the plans come in after that they're approved, they're a little hesitant, understanding the fact that, they're perhaps they change their mind. And sometimes that happens. And you have to pay this stormwater utility fee. What we don't cover is we don't cover nuisance flooding. Sometimes we get these requests, hey, there's standing water in my yard. It's attracting bugs. And we do not cover lot-to-lot drainage. So we have 1.75 million in annual funding. We approve about 10 projects per year. And the funding is based off the ranking, based off the integrated prioritization model. Now, I will point out, sometimes we could have a project that comes in at 11th. Sometimes it'll move up. Sometimes it'll move down if we get projects that come in that are scored higher in the model. It's not necessarily first come, first serve. If you come in 10th, you're not guaranteed to move up or necessarily move down. Now, generally, they do move up as we approve projects, and we've got 2 stream stabilization projects that we are going to look at today. So these are the pending projects. I know it's a little bit tough to see that they're on your packet. This is just 25. Right now, we have 95. And the project location maps, the 2 projects that we're going to be looking at are relatively close to the 440 belt line. 108 Pinecroft and 3504 Rock Creek. 108 Pinecroft being just north of the belt line, a little bit west of Capitol Boulevard, and 3504 Rock Creek, a little bit south of the belt line and a little bit west of Capitol Boulevard as well. So 108 Pinecroft Drive. This was applied in 1967 and built in 1967, so relatively older property. This is a stream stabilization project, as I mentioned before. And there's 200 linear feet of stream erosion that's going on. You can see it's about 4 to 5 feet in height. Now, I will point out that this is just on the side of 108 Pinecroft Drive. The neighboring owners to the west or south, they have since gone and kind of done some repairs on their south project. And what I will say is that for these costs, these are 100% funded by the city, like the Raleigh Grant afterwards. There's a cost share. We start off as a cost share program. These are estimates, so you're not going to see any plans like you saw on the previous presentation. The reason for that is, once the project is approved by you guys, hopefully, and then to council, then we go ahead and we start looking at plans. We put a design together, a consultant, surveyor, and then we have some plans to look at. So we just have, this is just the pictures from the general site visits. And what we are estimating for is $180,000 for this project. So we welcome to take any questions about this project. Yes.
What are your techniques? I mean, every project's different. What are your kind of what's your toolkit for stabilization? For methods for explaining stabilizing this bank.
So, I mean, we generally look at it on a case-by-case basis. I think for this one, we try and put in some riprap, smoothing out the slope a little bit. This is 30 feet from the house, so we can take back that slope a little bit. There's some room to work with on that. But yeah, generally, I mean, we'll look at a case-by-case basis. So I think for this one, we'll be passing backstream riprap.
planting?
We could do plans, yes.
Guess the word regret doesn't do me any good. So I know it's an preferred engineering, so it's really is what it would, I would like to see, is there a way that there's a layered approach to, bioengineering and stuff like that? That's obviously regret would be part of the equation.
Yes, and we did do a workshop with NC State where we looked at some plantings and alternative methods like glass staking. That could be something we could explore because that is, more cost effective.
Yeah, sure. So maybe a distinction here, I want to make sure, under the drainage assistance program that Chaz is presenting right now, these projects tend to score high because the erosion is infringing on some structure. So typically we have less room to work, and it tends to lean more towards some type of a structural solution, as opposed to the stream bank stabilization program, which Chaz is developing as a relatively new program, as well as other stream restoration projects that we do. We do emphasize much more a natural vegetative stabilization type approach and stable sloping back banks and so forth. So this is a little unique in terms of the drivers for this program and how projects would score well for this situation. Thank you.
I have another question, sorry. And so I guess I'm asking about like the context. So like this part of the stream is really eroded, but what about like upstream, downstream? Does it make sense to take on just this one parcel, or should it be looked at more holistically?
So, yeah, we can go back to the map. So you see these yellow dots are the complaints. We have not had complaints down here. And we have not had complaints to the northwest. So we are complaint driven. Now, that is one of the things we are trying to get away from is going in and identifying projects that we could. But right now we're complaint driven. So these were the ones that complained, and you notice that there's severe erosion threatening the structure.
Right. So does that mean you're fixing the stream on that whole left side?
On this side, on one-way Pinecroft, yes. On this side, we will not. They've done some repairs and it's not really threatening the structure, as you can see.
Or you haven't engaged with the landowner or the kind of the end of the, where is the 200-foot run? I guess just curious.
Yeah, it starts right here, it goes down to the valley.
You are dealing with the second landowner.
Well, they're the only landowners that assigned the intent form. So we're only working on their side of the property. What you can't see on the pictures because the other side of the property is relatively stable. It's like that.
So if I could add some context again too, and this is a policy we're working on revisions that we're going to be bringing to the commission here shortly. But this is again a policy where we are where we are. We want to move towards some modifications to, so your point, Commissioner. When we get situations where we want to take a more comprehensive approach, those will tend to go more toward the stream stabilization or perhaps even a larger capital improvements project where that would make sense and score well. As Chaz said, up to now and to this point, this is primarily complaint driven. There's a requirement under this policy that the property owner, in order to qualify for the policy, must grant the easement for free. This is private property, so the city has no obligation. This is a benefit we're bringing to the community to do this work. So in exchange for benefiting for that, they have to donate a permanent drainage easement to the city. So that makes it hard. The more property owners who get involved, some may or may not benefit and may not be willing to grant that easement for free. So that's a situation when then again, it goes into a larger capital improvements project, and then we would score it under that program. So a little more context, and we'll be bringing back more information to the commission explaining these policies and how they're evolving and some proposed changes that we'd like to make.
It seems like this is the highest safety criticality score that you have in your cache.
On prioritization model?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
A lot of these that were scored higher, we saw one with Golden Street a couple months ago with a pipe running at the house. that scored really high, but those have run through the system,
Okay.
so to speak, over the years that we've done this.
Thank you for all the explanation.
Thank you for the questions. Any other questions about Pinecroft before we go on to Rock Creek? All right, so 3504 Rock Creek, built in 1967, recorded in 1947. Now you see on this property that this complaint goes back to 2018. The previous one was 2020. But as you can see that, the creek has, when they designed this property, sort of followed the property line. You can see it's kind of shifted throughout the years, and it's moved closer a little bit to the house. So you can see that on this one, it's about 6 feet in height on the erosion. It's about 25 feet from the structure and 20 feet from the deck. There was a sewer pipe crossing that they had, and they went in and repaired that portion, but this portion over here, which is to be on your map to the west, this is where the sewer line, to the northeast, this is where the sewer line is crossing. They've got the erosion on the side, about 125 linear feet, and we are estimating about $170,000. Now, I understand that the cost is a little bit, it's not as long as the project. But the fact is, this is a little bit more complicated with the sewer line there, a little bit more mobilization. So that's why costs are relatively similar, even though they're about different in length. So welcome any questions about 35 for Rock Creek.
Did you say this all has to be caused by the runoff from the city road?
Yes, this has to be public contribution from
Is it all caused by it, or is it just some has to?
well, there has to be flow that comes in from a public right-of-way street. You can't just have someone that's uphill of you flowing down to your neighbor, and if there's no public contribution, that's where we don't get involved.
Can you just show us where that is?
I don't have it zoomed out enough to show which public street it's coming from, but that is one of the things we look at to make sure that it is coming. That's a pretty well-defined channel. Which street it
So it
is.
could be anywhere.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
Okay, so it's pretty loose. I mean, there are a lot of houses.
There's, yes.
In that street, sorry.
Any more questions for Chad? Looking at the numbers, so if we approve both of these, 27,000 remains for this fiscal year, which is not much. So that means we pretty much are done with the drainage assistance projects. Just scanning, there are only 2 projects that are under that, not that we operate in this way to elevate different status. And then by July 1, then the accounts are reset. Is that correct?
It is, just a clarification though, there is still some leftover funding in previous years that's available, so we're not necessarily done.
Okay.
After we use this fiscal year's money, there are some projects that previously did move forward, that we can move that money forward. So we're working on clearing those up so that we have additional funds. So we'll bring you back an update on how much is available, but we're not necessarily done. The other issue here is capacity too. So, we don't want to move forward more quickly and bring you more work than we can deliver as well, right? We want to keep up with that. So that's a balancing act. But there is more money that's available.
Okay, but these remaining funds will not be shown in what's before, the fund process has not yet been realized.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Any more questions? Okay. May I have a motion that we approve both projects?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor, say aye. Yes. Any opposed? Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, now I call Scott forward.
Thank you, Representative. Good afternoon. It's wonderful to be together here. This is great. Thank you all. Welcome new members as well. I'm Scott Bryan. I work with the Stormwater Planning Business Team. Wayne mentioned our budget. A great job championing for us, and thanks for your support for our program. We couldn't do it without support and the resources to do all the things that we do. So with that great support, and Javier is here as well. Javier, welcome to our team. Around this time last year, yours truly was running the financial model. We got through it, but so glad we got a financial professional on board here. Engineer running the financial model. We got through that and worked out pretty good. But Javier, welcome to the team again, our financial manager on board. It's my pleasure to introduce our Raftellus WK Dixon team. They're our financial and program management consultant, and have been helping us with financial modeling, rate study, rate modeling, as well as benchmarking and CIP financing strategy. So we've got a lot there. We mentioned our revenue bonding as planned by FY25 or before. Moving that just as quickly as we can to support our capital program. So excited about that today. I would like to welcome Katie and Tricia up here from our Raftellus team. We're going to talk about our financial modeling and the support for our budgeting and the modeling and all the work that Javier leads us in the financial area. Benchmarking update. Last year, around this time, we gave you updates on our capital program benchmarking. The team has carried that forward and updated the capital benchmark, as well as this year incorporating operations, staffing resources and the operational resources, which are very significant. So very thankful for them to be here. And I'm going to turn this over to Katie and thank Katie and Tricia. And thank you all for your support for us.
Great. Well, thanks so much for the warm introduction, Scott. That was so great. And it is so great to see all of you in person. And as Scott mentioned, we have been working with the city for about, in the stormwater team for about 2.5 years. And these are just some members of our project team. As Scott said, I'm Katie Cromwell. I work closely with Keith Redling and some other Raftellus staff on this. Keith has presented to you all before a couple years ago. We have Tricia here from WK Dixon. Formerly, this picture was actually Mr. Mark Sr., but we're trying to help him into retirement. And so we are very happy to have Tricia join our team, and she has been so great. And then also we have Inga Kennedy with Planners for Environmental Quality. She is a public outreach and communications expert. We haven't used her on any of our current statement of works, but we definitely plan on utilizing her expertise in the future. And so currently we are in our second statement of work. And for this statement of work, one of the first things we did in the first statement of work was build a financial planning model. And so this time around, we've done some updates to the financial modeling, and we've been working with Javier and the city stormwater team to transition to being able to use that financial planning model for budgeting purposes. It also plays a really large role in how we think about and plan for our CIP financing strategy. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. And then we also, in our previous statement of work, we did some initial benchmarking. In this effort, we have updated it and expanded it. And that's really what the bulk of this presentation today is going to be about. And then we have just started our work looking at the credit program. So I'm not going to talk about that today, but it's something that we are also working on, and hopefully we can share some information on that in the future. So first, just to talk a little bit about the financial modeling. So this is just a snapshot of what the dashboard of the financial planning model looks like. Don't focus too much on the numbers, but the thing that I really want to emphasize here is the flexibility of the model. We can plug in different, rate increases, different level of service scenarios, and definitely incorporate different options for CIP financing. So that's kind of, the tool is really meant to be not just a budget tool, but also a full financial planning model that, you know, you guys can use into the future. And then this is just an example of what the expense inputs look like. You know, we can plug in budgeted and actuals, and so we can really be able to accurately show cash flows and, you know, what fund balances look like based on the different scenarios. So next I'm going to talk about the CIP financing strategy. This is something that we've been working really hard on and really closely with not just the city stormwater team, but also other people in the city to make sure that the stormwater financing strategy kind of aligns with some of the other city goals and other kind of things that they have upcoming in their portfolios. So one of the things that we modeled was a 20-year revenue bond at $30 million. As Wayne mentioned, looking at issuing it in FY 2025. But, you know, if everybody's ready to get going, maybe we'll be able to do that sooner. And the other thing that we've talked a lot about are bond anticipation notes, or bands. And these are basically short-term notes that can be issued pretty immediately, and you can kind of get access to the funding and get started on it. And it leads into a longer term financing, so a traditional revenue bond. So that would, one of the benefits of it is it would give you a little more time to make sure you have all your ducks in a row so that you can get the highest bond rating possible, the best rates, and all of that stuff. And this is a really, we're seeing a lot of local governments using this. Raleigh Water has utilized this, so it's something that the city more broadly is familiar with the use of bands. So I think that's something that we're also in conversation talking about. So I think that that's using bonds might be a way, bands might be a way for us to be able to get started a little bit sooner than 2025, if that's the direction that we want to go. And certainly the financial model can accommodate that sort of modeling scenario. So I went through that really fast. Obviously, when we get to the end, I'm happy to answer any questions on all of that. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to the fun stuff, all of the benchmarking work. Turn it over to Krista.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah.
So hello, everyone. So happy to be here. As Katie mentioned, I am replacing Mark Sr. For W.K. Dixon on this project. Big shoes to fill, tough act to follow, not only just in general, but because he's been part of Raleigh Stormwater for such a long time. So hopefully I can live up to that standard here today. So what I'm here to talk about, of course, is the benchmarking of stormwater programs throughout the Southeast. And I do have to say, I haven't done, this is all your first meeting in a couple of years. This is my first in-person presentation in that same amount of time. And I've gotten really used to Zooming and teaming my meetings and reading from my notes. So if I seem a little off, I apologize. Anyway, so I may have to refer to my notes from time to time. So the initial benchmarking focused on the services that were provided by different cities. And those initial cities were Raleigh, well, compared to Raleigh, but so Charlotte, Greenville, North Carolina, Nashville, and Davidson County. They run the program together, Austin, Texas. And that focus was mainly on the services provided and kind of higher level CIP and budget information. And so this round, what we've done is added, Katie alluded to this, we added, expanded to 2 more cities, Durham next door, and then Columbia, South Carolina. And then we added additional questions. And those questions mostly focus, kind of dive deeper into the CIP funding and financing, as well as other program areas such as staffing,
expenditures, revenue sources, and we even got into fee credit programs. So we're going to talk about all of that. But first, I wanted to review kind of the last round of benchmarking. These were the results, and we added to it the results from Durham and Columbia. So we reached out to them and got the data from them as well. So what this is a matrix of the level of service, level of funding that each city provides for that particular service. So it's not, we'll get into this, but it's not a percentage of what they put their program budget to, but it's a comparison of the cities relative to each other about how much funding they put into that particular program. So I'm just going to do a high level overview of a few things I wanted to point out. So you'll notice that the city of Raleigh, of course, if there's a dot in that cell on this matrix, that means that that city provides the service. If there's no dot, they don't provide that service. And then the size of the dot relates to, again, how they compare to each other in terms of the funding provided for that service across all cities, just for that particular service. I hope I'm making sense with that. So you'll see that Raleigh provides the most services. So it provides the widest variety, the most diverse program. So that may explain why maybe some of the dots are smaller relative to the other cities, because other cities really, I think Durham is probably the closest in terms of the variety of services provided. So that's the overall result from the first round of benchmarking, adding the 2 new cities. But I wanted to point out a few other interesting things in terms of some of the larger dots. So the second from the top is this.
You can't project a laser on the TV screen, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
You have to use cursor on it.
Oh, okay. Well, so the second from the top, the public drainage system requirements, those are fairly large funded programs from Charlotte, Austin, and Columbia. And as we'll see, when we get into what their financing sources are, they, except for Austin, Columbia and Charlotte both do revenue. They have issued revenue bonds. So that includes, so that public drainage system includes the CIP program. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why you see a large funding effort for those 3 cities and maybe a little less for the other cities. To contrast that, Chaz just talked about the public drainage system on private property. That's 2, 3, 4, or 5 down. You see all but 2 cities have that program. Charlotte, we have the word deferred in there, and that means they used to provide that, but they're on a 5-year kind of break from that because they were getting so far behind in their public drainage projects. So they've deferred their assistance to private properties for at least 5 years now. So that's what that means. One other thing, I guess, since we talked about rainwater rewards here tonight, that line there refers to, of course, other programs, other cities that have similar incentive programs. They're not all the same. They're not all the same, but they're the same idea. They provide incentives for private property owners to control stormwater on their sites when they don't necessarily have to. And so you see that the other example would be, I know Columbia, their program, what they do is not as extensive or even as broad as the city of Raleigh. They pretty much just participate with a cost sharing with another, I think one of the soil conservation district, and provide low cost rain barrels for property owners. So it's a pretty low key relative to what Raleigh's doing. So that's kind of the results, what we looked at in terms of the initial benchmark and adding our 2 new cities in. And we're going to get into this. We are preparing a report that goes along with this that will really dive in deeper and explain in detail what all this means relative and what it means for the city of Raleigh. Okay, so because we all like to look at numbers here,
it's just some of the metric data, the service area size, the population, the total stormwater budget. Now this is, we updated all this is for fiscal year 22. So that's the latest data we had available. We have the CIP budget. And then we looked at it, we're going to look at this graphically in a minute, but the stormwater budget per capita and then the CIP budget per capita. I want to point out, we're going to look at this also a little more closely. This, for the CIP, this is just a snapshot in time. It's their annual CIP budget for fiscal year 22. And what we'll see is that changes over their long range plan, usually a 5 or 6 year plan. So this is just a snapshot. Okay, so what I wanted to start with in terms of the numbers, so that kind of just gives you, the previous table just gives you some big numbers. And I like looking, what's the population of Austin? Why is their budget so high? What's the service area? How does this all compare to Raleigh, what we have? So, but I think the first thing to look at, of course, is what is the stormwater fee? Because there's a large range of fees. So we split this into, on the left side of the graph is the single family parcel rate for a monthly rate for a typical. We used a 3,000 square foot or impervious area on a single family parcel. You can't compare them exactly because there's different tiers. Some cities use flat rates, some use flat rates for different tiers. The tiers are marked off at different levels. So we do say we took a 3,000 square foot impervious area and what tier would that fit in every city? And that's the monthly fee there on the left. And you can see Raleigh's in the green. And so of all of them, it's the lowest for that size single family lot compared to the other cities that we looked at. What's the other? The yellow is, of course, Nashville. That's pretty low. And then Durham is also, those are the 3 lowest. Now, when we go to the commercial, well, we call them non-single family, but it's really the commercial, industrial, government buildings. We decided to look at a typical lot that had, what's the typical amount of impervious area being paid by that type of parcel. And that's about 20,000 square feet of impervious area for that type of parcel. And this is the monthly fee. And so obviously it's much greater. We're not comparing apples to apples for the non-single family versus the single family, but just relative to each other, you can see how different they are. Again, Raleigh's on the low end. Austin and Columbia are real high. You've got Columbia, I can't remember what the percentage was, but they just raised their rate by quite a bit. In fact, I believe their single family rate, well, it's right there, $14.15. That's pretty much double what Raleigh's is for a single family parcel. And so it also shows that their commercial, I'll call it the commercial rate. I'm just used to using that, but their commercial rate is pretty high too. And relatively speaking, the other thing I wanted to point out, well, so for Austin, even though their single family rate is kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of monthly rates, they have a much different structure for their commercial rates. And so it's really high, almost equal to what Columbia's is, very high. Again, I'm just doing a very broad, high level, overview of these, just to give you an idea of where Raleigh stands relative to these communities.
That point.
Sorry, I can make one comment here.
Yes. Yes.
The purpose of your benchmarking project was really to look at how CIPs are allocated and how operations costs are allocated against peer cities that we consider progressive stormwater programs to give us ideas of how we may want to move forward. So what I don't want to leave you with the impression is that Raleigh's rates are lower than everybody else's. That is not true. Okay. They were true for this selected peer group of cities. If you look at us relative to everyone in North Carolina, we're probably somewhere in the middle of stormwater fees, okay? So the fact that we are the lowest fee here, we are not the lowest fee in general. We're the lowest of this peer city group that are progressive, that give us ideas of where our program should be going. So I just wanted to provide that context.
No, thank you.
Tricia, because we have some new commission members and for folks that may be listening and as well.
No, thank you. That's a very good point. We showed a rate of just North Carolina stormwater programs fees. Yes, you'd be right in the middle. And I wanted to say this in the beginning too about, the purpose of benchmarking. One of the reasons is to look at innovative things. What are other cities doing? They're innovative to maybe for this city. Also, to look at what is the standard of practice across a number. Now, again, we're just looking at your 6 cities plus yours. And then, sorry, do you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask when, of these cities, which do you prefer? Are there any you consider progressive?
I would consider all of these progressive. It's in their own ways, which is there's a diversity of types of programs here. Charlotte, I would consider probably the most mature stormwater program in North Carolina. They've had a stormwater utility for since the 90s, the early 90s, whereas Raleigh started our stormwater utility fee in 2004. So they've had a head start on us. And so many of their programs are more mature. Columbia, their program is, I would say, different in that they've had a lot of flooding issues and have issued some large bonds to address flooding issues within their community. So that was something, because we're considering bonding, that we wanted to look at them from that perspective. And so each of these programs have some unique aspects that we thought could be helpful for us to learn from different aspects of their program. So, very much these were hand-selected communities we thought we could learn things from, not necessarily just a broad spectrum of what stormwater programs look like in the Southeast.
Can I ask an add on to that? From a fee standpoint, I'm a homeowner, I live right on the left. And that's the fee I pay on my water bill or whatever it is, right? But you didn't inflate the other because they have a bond passed, right? I mean, that's just a straight fee. It's not additional taxes that they're paying because of the bond. It's a set fee. Okay.
The stormwater fee is a set fee.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so revenue bonds, what that means is that's all being recovered from the fee revenues. So you have to have the revenue stream from, So some of these places may issue general obligation bonds, GO bonds. So in that case, the way that they fund those GO bonds may vary. Some places they'll just use tax dollars so if they issue a GO bond, even if it's for a stormwater project, they may use tax dollars, and they'll just do it that way. Sometimes, and this happens in Austin a little bit, is they'll issue a GO bond just because they can get a good rate, but they're paying it back with the fee revenue. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but when you're issuing a stormwater revenue bond, that is all being paid back with stormwater fee revenue. So that's one of the reasons why Columbia's fee jumped so much. They issued some big bonds. And I mean, we brought up the great point that, they had some flooding. There was a lot of political will towards it. I think the other thing to think about when we're talking about potentially issuing bonds is, the real benefit of it, as well as you can accelerate capital projects, but it's also really the only way to create intergenerational equity. Raleigh is a growing city, and, some of the people that are attracted to this area, they can also be paying for some of the hard work that we're doing on accelerating capital projects. So that's another great point that I meant to make previously about CIP financing.
So did that answer your,
Yeah, thank you.
So guess my takeaway, just from my knowledge of the financing part, is that in the case of Columbia, they did raise their rate in order to get that revenue, but that's not, it's reflective of that, but everybody pays that, and that's just, and they had to approve that rate, right? The city council has to approve that rate. Okay. So understanding where your monthly fees are, then give you a picture, an idea of how the budgets work out too between the cities, because we're comparing them all, right? So on the left here, well, both of these are the annual stormwater budgets for fiscal year 22 for all the cities, based on looking at it on a per capita basis on the left, and then on the right, per square mile, per your, how much service area you serve. And so these are just the relative, and you can see that they all kind of mirror each other, except for Nashville and Columbia. You can see they go from, on a per capita basis, they're much higher than they are on a per square mile basis, and that has to do with population density. So if you look at Columbia, you know, they're the highest in terms of per capita rate, but the second to lowest when you're looking at it in terms of their per square mile. Okay, they have the lowest population density of any of the cities. Just a different way of looking at this. This is where you can really start comparing, right? Per square mile, per capita. So now on the left here is, now we're talking about CIP budget. And I said in the beginning that that table of numbers we had the fiscal year 22 CIP budget for that year. With most cities, all cities have the CIP budget planned out for 5 or 6 years. And so we thought it would be interesting and useful to look at the per capita annual budget for fiscal year 22 versus what that annual, you know, what the CIP budget over the 5 or 6 year period looked on a per capita basis. And it's quite different, similar for some cities again, but there's reasons behind. So one of the biggest things that stands out to me is the city of Greenville, which is the third from the left. That's, if you can see that they're the green. So this year it's $142 per capita for their CIP versus if you spread out their CIP over the 5 year period, that comes way down. And that's because there's many reasons, that they have a big project that's been in the works, it's been delayed, and so they have that. And once that's done, the next few years, right now, they don't have anything planned out over the next 5 years. If you look at the annual numbers over the 5 year period. So it's good to look at that. And the other thing I noticed about looking at it, CIP budgets over the plan range was that there is quite a difference, you know, from year to year. So it's good to look at that average. And of course, you would know this, that every year you go and you plan your CIP budget, even though last year's budget may have something for 3 years from now, that may change when you're looking at it again the next year. So things are, they're changing. So it's good to look at what the 5 year, because that gives you a better idea of what the city is planning on spending over that time range. We also looked at it in terms of CIP budgets per capita. And again, this is just for the fiscal year 22. So we're pretty much, it's pretty close to what you would expect just looking at it per capita in terms of there's some differences again, and that's again related to when you look at per square mile, it has to do with population density when you're comparing it to the per capita graph. Okay, so now, that was some of the CIP data and budget data we looked at. We also collected from the city, we asked them for staffing levels for their different program areas. And this is overall staffing for the different cities, how many full-time equivalents work specifically directly in the stormwater program. And the range is from the low from Nashville 17 up to 43 in Columbia,
on a population basis. And then again, the service area, same kind of situation for Nashville and Columbia. Because their population densities are lower, those are lower. Because here Raleigh is pretty even. It's actually in the higher range when you look at your square, your service area, because you have a higher population densities than some of these other cities. So that was interesting to look at in terms of your staffing. The other thing that benchmarking does give you, it gives you an idea of, where well, how do we compare, just in terms of simple things, not simple things, like, things like this, how many people does it take to run a program of this level? And it can also be used to, find new information, but also to validate what you're doing is good, because you're a good company doing similar work in very different areas though. Okay, so now the revenue sources. So the blue is first revenue for your stormwater programs. Of course, the majority is funded by the stormwater utility fee, and that's the blue. The yellow is the next second largest, and that's due to for most of these cities, it's due to appropriated fund balances. So they bring in funds prior that they're holding in reserve from their revenue and putting it back into their budget that year. So that's the case for Durham. Greenville has done that, and Charlotte-Mecklenburg has done it as well. The other large item that only 3 cities have, including Raleigh, and that's the plan review and permitting fee as a percentage of the total revenue. It's significant enough to show up here on the graph. And so you see where Raleigh fits in. Charlotte has a pretty robust plan review fee program where they get some good revenue, as well as a little bit for Austin. Those are the major sources of revenue. Okay, so now this ties in directly with what Katie was talking about. So we wanted to find out, how are these different cities financing their CIP projects? So first I'm going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about the types of projects that are being funded through their CIP program. So the blue, you can see Raleigh and Durham for the most part, in Greenville, fund cash, right? That's you're funding it through your revenue, your revenue. The other large for Columbia, you can see they have a major portion of their CIP that's their bond, their revenue bonds that they issued in 2018. That was their first issuance of revenue bonds. It was $38 million. And so this is the amount for their CIP program for fiscal year 22. Majority of what's funding those the projects for this year is from their revenue bonds. The other type of funding is program income. The only one who has really using that is Charlotte, and that's their mitigation banking program. It's the money they receive that from the mitigation banks, and they just put it right back into their CIP. So that's a substantial chunk. And I will say another thing. So just like CIP annual budgets change, so do how they're financing, especially in Charlotte, because this is where I saw it the most. Their balance between cash and their debt financing changed from year to year a little bit, but it evens out. It's not a huge range, but they do change from year to year, depending on maybe the project or the level of funding that they need that particular year. The other thing, Austin has something they call performance improvement bonds. I believe that's just a term for one of the types of general obligation bonds that they get. It's just another category that they use. So Austin does use, like Katie mentioned, they do use some debt financing, but they don't do revenue bonds. And when we talked to them, they were pretty,
They said they weren't ready for that term they used.
Yeah, they didn't really see, a reason for it when kind of they have always just gone the route of issuing general obligation bonds and paying some of that back with, fee revenues. So, they didn't have a strong driver in that respect. And I'll also say in Texas, that is not uncommon. Like that's a very common approach, for Texas in particular. So, in that respect, I wouldn't read too much into that because Texas does their own things. Because Texas.
For sure. Okay, so anyway, so that's how these different cities, our benchmark cities are financing, at least in the snapshot in FY '22. The types of projects that are being funded, what we did there is we divided the types of projects being funded into different categories. So the actual infrastructure, things related specifically to water quality control or environmental planning. So I know some CIP, like Greenville, has done a lot of master planning, and they've included those costs right into their CIP program because of a pretty large cost to do watershed and citywide master planning. Equipment, I know some cities, if it's they finance vehicles, fleet vehicles through their CIP program. So they have a category if it's $10,000 or more, or going to have a life over 10 years or so, they'll categorize it as CIP and include it in the CIP program. Anyway, so we just put the number of cities that finance that type of project.
We've got it only a couple more minutes,
Okay.
so I think.
So,
you might wanna speak.
okay, so here's the data for bond, who finances with bond data.
I think you all might have some of this stuff in your packets, so.
So anyway, so we have information about reserve policy, reserve funds. The CIP over the plan range, we've already gone through all that. So, and we've kind of already looked at that graphically. And so here's program staffing. Just quickly, I have some notes. So the major areas where staffing is put is obviously a drainage system and operations and maintenance. The blue is the planning and engineering. And those are, to me, those are the largest sectors that were program staffing. But every city characterizes their programs, you know, everybody's organization is a little bit different. So we tried to group them as best as we could. Program expenditures, where's the budget money going? Of course, the largest two would be the CIP and what we described as planning engineering, which makes sense. And then there's other details in there. And then the last thing we looked at was stormwater fee credit programs and the different types of credits you give. Most places, I think there's only one city that gives credit on single family parcels. Everybody else just does it on the non-single family parcels. Everybody except Charlotte would have to exceed the current standards, and Charlotte would just have to at least meet them to get the credit. Everybody has different levels of credit. Some have maximum credits they'll give you even if you meet the 50% for quantity and the 25% for quality. You don't get 75% credit on your fee. You might get just cap it at the city, might cap it at 50. So every city's a little bit different. I can have that information. Of course, we'll provide all the details in our report. I think that was, the number of credits being used. Credits aren't really used widely, and that's pretty much not just true for these cities, but I think that's generally true across the country. Everywhere people are just not using them or using them minimally. And so they're not
in terms of percentage of revenue, what's paid out, or not paid out, but reduced in fee credit is minimal, and it's minimal staff and more than one full-time equivalent per year to right now, in terms of, because people are using the credit. So I think that's it really, other than, so Raleigh, I know it sounds like that was one of the things Katie said, you're looking to maybe change your fee credit program.
So this information will certainly,
Yeah.
flow into that. So there's logic behind what we benchmarked. So hopefully we'll be able to answer. And we might be kind of out of time, but I guess if there's any quick questions, I'd be happy to answer questions.
I have a question on those quick. We know that models are only as good as the variables you consider and the data you feed it. Does your model have any correlation factors that take into account pre-existing conditions that may replicate disparity?
So are you talking about the
The
financial
financial model.
planning
Yeah.
model?
Yeah.
So are you talking about disparate, in what context?
So
do
I'm
you
thinking
mean
about,
disparities?
Caltrans, which California Department of Transportation has a financial model that takes into account some historic inequities. I think about Helping Hand Mission on Rockford Road. They pay a stormwater fee. They would be impacted more by an increase
I see.
than a corporation that's for profit.
Yep.
So I'm asking, does your financial model take into account what I call the pre-existing conditions that may help replicate or produce disparities?
Yeah, so I think specifically what you're talking about are like customer impacts.
Or the bond example.
Yeah. So we don't have that directly captured in the model, and I think the way that we would do that is we would include in the model, kind of in the back end, what feeds the model are the units of service, right? And their location and all of that. We have that all aggregated in the model, but the way that we could do that is certainly to break it out into those types of categories. And I think that sort of stuff also plays a really big role in how we think about the credit program. And that's something that like we've already talked about in our initial conversations about as we review the credit program, how can we, make sure that, the way that the credit program is designed and the way that people could potentially reduce their stormwater fee is equitable and doesn't just make the standard so high that only those, for-profit companies would be able to apply for and receive a reduction in their fees. So I think that that's something that we're really aware of as we think about the credit program. And then also we've talked about outreach related to that sort of stuff and making sure that our outreach approach really captures that. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, feel free to, because that interests me, so feel free
Yeah.
to share that in any presentations going forward.
Okay.
Any-
Okay,
I
great.
think pulling that out explicitly
Yeah.
would be helpful.
Okay. Thanks for that feedback.
Any other questions? Okay, any other business? All right. Oh, yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I believe I saw, and this is our first hybrid meeting, so we're still learning this, but I believe I saw a comment was in the chat in the WebEx that I'm not connected to, so I'm gonna ask Matt if he could just raise a citizen comment that could have been put in virtually, to get it into the meeting here. And what I'll do is lesson learned, I'll go ahead and connect to the WebEx for the future and keep it all muted so I can monitor that.
I believe some of the questions in there. I believe some of them were related. They probably couldn't see the slides initially, but I believe some of them are questions in there.
See one for Mr. Wells. Mr. Wells had provided a chat comment at the last meeting too. He's with the homeowners association. They are interested in doing a drainage assistance project. The way our policy is written right now is that if a specific property does not pay a stormwater fee, then it's not eligible for funding, like in the drainage systems program. And that homeowners association piece of property does not have any impervious surface on it, so it doesn't pay a fee for that property, but all the homeowners do. So, that's one of the things I mentioned, we're looking at some changes to the drainage systems policy. That's one of the things that we're writing in this in draft edits, and that we'll be bringing back to you all for consideration.
I believe Kathy is requesting the R3 presentation material and provide an email address.
Yes, and we'll put all of the materials on board docs. I believe they were all placed on board docs, just like the city council information is on board docs. So the public has access to all of the materials that have been distributed.
And some staff initially could not see the presentation, but we were able to share the actual screen, so they were able to see the presentation for the other ones. And I believe that's all I have. And I think this is duplicate from.
Okay. Good. Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, just want to say how encouraged I am that, to hear so many comments and questions from so many different people. And I just encourage that as we continue through this year. Motion to adjourn? Second. All those in favor? All right, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.